Welcome to Business Financing Insights from Celtic Capital. Today, Mark Hafner, President and CEO of Celtic Capital, talks about what business owners can do when their bank asks them to leave or turns down their business loan request.
So there are many times that banks can't finance businesses for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the business is too new in business, so banks typically want to see 3 to 4 years in business before they'll start financing somebody, just to get their traction under them. We had a company years ago that we financed. It was a ceramic manufacturer, and when they first called us, they said they were just starting up. And so I went down to meet them, and I walked through the warehouse, and it was empty. And they said, our kilns are going to go here, and our quality control is going to go here, and they kind of mapped out their vision. And I said, okay, we went ahead. We literally started financing them from their first invoice. We financed them for about 2.5 years, and then the bank was ready to take them on. Bank took them on. They financed with the bank for about 2 years, got themselves into trouble, which I'll comment on in a minute. And then we took them back, financed them for another about 1.5 years, and there were 2 partners in the business. And the partners had a falling out. They decided to shut the business, and so we liquidated it. So literally cradle to grave, we financed them. So it was kind of interesting. But that was an example on the front end of why the banks wouldn't finance them, because they were just starting in business. And then after they went to the bank, when they got into trouble, they had a couple of down years revenue-wise, and so they lost some money. And with an established business, banks are looking at their financial viability. So they're looking at their balance sheet and their P&L to determine if they qualify. And one of the reasons banks are regulated is so that they're only lending into stronger businesses. So oftentimes businesses stumble along the way or don't have the type of capital they need to be successful in the long term. So I typically describe it as either they have a balance sheet issue, which means that they don't have enough capital typically in the business and they're too highly leveraged, or they have a P&L issue, which means they've lost money. And so those are 2 things that the banks typically don't like to see. Or the business is growing too rapidly, and the banks don't like to see that because they're worried they're going to outstrip their capital and be too highly leveraged. So when you look at the borrower's choices then, if they're with a bank that's saying, we can't help you anymore, or they're going to a bank that says they can't help them to begin with, there are alternative lenders that can fill that gap. But there's some things you have to expect with an alternative lender. The alternative lender is going to have more controls on the business in terms of monitoring of the collateral, for example. An asset-based lender like Celtic, we're financing the assets, the accounts receivable, the inventory, the equipment, and so our lending parameters are tied to the values of those assets. But an alternative lender is going to be a higher priced lender than the bank. Obviously, we're not a bank, for example, and so we're borrowing our funds from a bank, turning around and lending them out. So our costs are higher, our cost of funds are higher than the banks. Our cost of administration is higher because we're doing more of this monitoring, and our risk is higher because we're financing somebody at a riskier time of their development. So when banks do say no to your loan request, you should spend some time with the banker to understand why they're saying no. Is it because of your balance sheet or your P&L, or are there other factors? Do they think you're going to grow too fast? But find out what is causing them to say no and what you have to do to get in compliance so that they can say yes. It also helps to reach out to others to learn more about it. So you can talk to your CPAs, business consultants, that type of thing, and learn about different alternative sources of financing, either from the banker or these other consultants. You can talk to other people in your industry to see how they've financed before. But there are different types of financing outside of banks. There's asset-based lending, factoring, venture capital, private equity. There's a variety of sources, and the more you can learn about it, then that can guide you to where you need to be currently until the banks can say yes. So again, aligning with those experts is key, and you have to keep your perspective when you're looking at your choices. It's going to be more expensive than bank financing. But you have to look at, well, what can I do with the money? Don't get hung up on the rate so much as look at the dollar cost, see if it can fit into your P&L, and see what you can do with the money. Can you use this loan to take your business to the next step, which will then cause you to be more bankable? We have a client currently that a year and a half ago gave us notice that they were going to exit because they had a bank lined up to take them on. It was a year and a half ago. The bank has been stretching them out because the company doesn't quite qualify. It's not the bank's fault, but the borrower doesn't have the balance sheet and the P&L quite yet ready to move, but they think they can, and the bank says, well, let me see next quarter's results. The next quarter goes by, well, it's not quite ready, and it just has strung out now for a year and a half. We've put an offer in front of the client over a year ago to reduce our cost to them if they renewed for another period of time. They could have saved a significant amount of money by just taking that deal initially, and now they might be ready to actually move to the bank. But they're still with us and at paying our higher price as opposed to what we proposed to them that we could lower it to.
Thank you for listening today. If you'd like to talk to Mark Haffner about your specific business financing issue or about making referrals to Celtic Capital, sign up for a quick one-on-one chat with him at www.celticcapital.com. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to our podcast channel to hear more business financing insights from Celtic Capital.